For the demonstration, I'm going to just use a token. And what I will then do is I will provide the token or the name of the meeting, AGM demo. So I'll just give it a name. I can give it a further description. I'll get into that just now. Typically, and then I would typically set up the date when the meeting will happen. I can schedule it for in the future and saying this meeting will happen at, say, 6 o'clock, which I've not seen, but I've seen a couple of 9 o'clocks, but not a 6 o'clock. But let's say, for instance, I want to set it for 6 o'clock. So you can then set it for 6 o'clock in the morning, or most probably 6 o'clock in the afternoon would be a better time. Or in my case, because I'm going to do the demo now, I'm going to set the time for now. So I'm going to schedule the meeting to happen now. We can then also use the default agenda for the SDSM as per the layout of the Act. What we do find is that we have built it in based again on a compliance provisioncy. But what we do find is that most body corporates and all managing agents have got their own cadence and their own structure. And they would not like to vary their behavior in terms of how they conduct their meetings, purely because owners are familiarized with the way that they run meetings. So in that case, we do also allow them to set up their own agenda. For now, I'm just going to set up my own agenda, and I can then from there also identify which template I use. And that template, remember, is the configuration of the system at the back end. In terms of how do I treat abstentions and so I'm just going to use the standard one. I presume for today it's mostly body corporates, but the same principle will apply, and you can make the changes as you go through the meeting if you run a HOA or a trustee or whatever meeting. So I'm creating the meeting, and what will happen is on the meeting, I now have the structure of the meeting. So I have the details of the meeting. I can again confirm my proxy limits. I can then display what should be displayed on the front end and to the owners. So do I display it as units or owners? Typically for body corporates, it's units, owners. HOAs refer to their units as IRVs and or stands. They don't refer to a unit typically, in which case we then would have a different view that we then will have on that. So you can then set that up, and then again you can also set some values at the bottom, but for now I've already predefined it based on my template that I'm using. I can now go and say notice is given, and I do spelling mistakes on purpose, so you can see it's a live demo, not because I suck at typing. Notice is given. And I can then format the text in terms of color. Let's make that blue, and then and the size and stuff like that, so that you can format the mail. And what will happen is that when we do send out the invite to owners via the mail and or display the information on the app, everything that we set up in terms of logos, colors, font sizes will be what will be displayed in the app, as well as if you do push out a email via the system, you can then just format your email accordingly. So you've got a rich text editor, what we call rich text editor, so you can put up a very nicely formatted, colorful logos and an email that you can send through the system. And again, it's up to the managing agent and or the body corporate whether they prefer to have the emails being sent as a MeetingPal invite, or whether they still want to run it independently and send the invites as what they would have normally done. But we allow for the system allows for both of those actions to happen on that at that point. So when you do want to run a dry run meeting, after you've created the meeting and set up the meeting, you just send us an email, and we as administrators have got the ability to duplicate a meeting as well, and so that we can then create a meeting for you to run a separate dry run meeting based on the structure for the actual meeting that will happen in a week or two's time or a month's time. So we allow you then to set up a dummy meeting or use that same meeting, and then for you to then run a trial run or a dry run, a test, whatever you want to call it, so that your owners and your users can get familiarized with the system. We also at the back end, we also, especially when you buy an annual license as a body corporate, and you intend to move from one managing agent, or you move from one managing agent to another during the year, again, we can assign the license to another managing agent or administrator. So if you let us know that the remainder of the period, we will then assign onto another body or managing agent, or if you want to self-manage it yourself, that's also fine. So if I then look at my agenda, I can upload an agenda from an Excel spreadsheet, or I can create an agenda, and I'm going to keep it simple. Approve 2020 AGM minutes. Let's say, for instance, that would be one of our, I'm not going to go into the time allocated, so I'll just create that one. So I know I'll have a normal that and on that, and then typically I want to show you how we then manage elect trustees, because what will happen in a lot of cases, and we do assist many meetings, what we've seen is that typically you do not have enough nominations. You need to get nominations from the floor. And even though we set up the structure and take away a lot of pressure for the administrator in preparing for the meeting, but during the meeting, you might have to change wording on a resolution, or extend, typically, as I say, get more nominations from the floor, in which case you can then do that dynamically while the meeting is underway. We also then have our invitation, the invite email, what it will look like. You can preview the mail and see, this is the text that I've just added. What we have is we do have a structure where once you've uploaded your owners list, we will then automatically replace the Dear John Smith, the name, with Dear Puna, Dear Owner 1, Dear Owner 2, whatever, and we'll provide them with a link where they can do an RSVP. What we do find is that in terms of the act, the POPI Act, it's typically very difficult for managing agents to schedule a meeting and then have everybody's details available once they schedule the meeting. Owners do get a bit upset about that. So in this case, what we do is we allow you to click on the link, and from the link we can then take you into the system, so you can do an RSVP, add it to your diary. So it's only applicable to yourself, especially the corporate clients, professional owners. They prefer to have it in their diary so they can have a proper view on their diary. So by clicking on the RSVP, it will then take you into the system, and then you can then register and then add it to your diary. We also have a standard text with the download instructions, how to download MeetingPal, how to use it. And just getting back to the meeting invite itself, you can change the wording invite to, and wherever we have this curly brackets, that is system generated and or system replaceable text that we will then replace from the system. So if you have meeting title, when I send out the invite now, it will then actually say TVD AGM demo. So invited to, and we'll then replace that text with that. Also the attendee name, when it's scheduled, and things like that. You can format it. You can typically over years where you would add your Zoom or your Teams or your Skype link or your link. So we do run with many systems at this point in time in terms of the support that we have at the back end. So on that basis, this is typically where you can then set up your system. You can also, if you do delete some of it, you can see and copy the text across that. You can see what it will look like on that side. So that's the meeting invite. Meeting downloads is typically where you upload and attach all your board packs. So let's let me go into here, and I've got a PDF here. which is not related, but it's a PDF file so that you can then set it up. And I want to show you what it will look like in the invite as well as on the app. So we try to keep everything contained. I say this with a lot of respect. Owners do attend the meetings, but then they also query they've not received certain documents. Please send them during the meeting, or they request a copy of the budget, the levy schedule, and things like that. So by having it also as part of the app, it allows us then for them to just literally just go and click and download the document, access the document in the place. Right, so now we're getting to the crux of it, where we're going to the units. So for us to add the units, you can go and create units one by one. It's all fair if you're running a small scheme of say up to say 10 owners. If you do run a fairly large scheme, it's important, or it's easier to upload an Excel spreadsheet. I do have an Excel spreadsheet open, which I will then just quickly drag into this screen. So typically what we do require is an Excel sheet that's containing the following information somewhere in the sheet. So we don't prescribe the format, the structure of it. We're just saying we want somewhere to identify the owner, the unit number, sorry, the unit number. This could be cell phone numbers, which we're not going to use. Then we want to know who are the owners of the units, and then some other useless information that's not pertinent to the meeting. On the body corporate, the PQ value, so we can then do the value calculation, and then the email addresses. We also find that many owners do have not only one email address, but they have many email addresses, so we do cater for all those email addresses. And once we get into the system, we can then see which one of those email addresses will be the voting power to execute voting on behalf of that specific unit. So I've got a couple of email addresses here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just literally going to go and I'm going to pick up that specific Excel spreadsheet, and I'll choose it, and I think I call it that. So all I do now is I go and say, just click, where will I find the unit name? I will find the unit name, unit number, and the column A. Where will I find the owner name? That is in column C. Where will I find the email column? That looks like it's in column F. And the vote column is the PQ column is column E. As I said, if you have mixed schemes, you can then set up certain owners as commercial, residential. If you run HOAs, again, you might have different voting schemes and or powers, and you can then set up those groups and then have different votings for different groups. We do calculate the quorums for the groups individually, because typically those conduct rules also require then that you have a quorum for the whole body corporate, but then there's a quorum for the commercial side, quorum for your residential, and so on that basis you can then set up your groups. I'm not going to set up groups, but we will then on that basis. So now I've now imported that list, and it's immediately now split up by units. It's created all my owners for me with their PQ values, as well as based on those email addresses, it will then identify specific invitees that we can then set up the meeting for. I just want to point out one thing that you need to also check is that the moment you upload it, and it is a body corporate, the first test for yourself is to make sure that your unit total value equals 100, because that is what it should be. The total PQ value should add up to 100. So I'm happy I've at least got that. It's not applicable to HOAs. On HOAs, it needs to add up to the number of ERS or stands that you've got. So just take that into consideration, but that's your first test that you can check. Yes, I've uploaded my information correctly. And then on the top here, if I then go into a unit with multiple owners, I can then go and say, which one of these owners are going to be the voting authority, who's got the power of authority to cast their vote. So, and I can just go like, okay, this is the person or that person, and it can only be one, so I can save that then, or And we do find that quite often when we get into the meeting, even though we use email addresses that we have on record for the body corporate, when we get into a meeting, owners will join through either their business accounts or a different email address. And in that case, you can then add those linked email addresses, an additional email address, and then set the voting to whoever can cast their vote at that point. So that's just typically the backing. I can confirm, so every owner can then confirm their PQ values. And as I say, the first test is that it must add up to 100. I also have then my list of owners. We do also cater for owners that's got multiple units. So in this case, I've got an owner with a number of units. So they will only have one vote in number, but the value vote will be a combination, the aggregation or the total of their PQ values will then determine the value vote. So that is the principle around that. Also, what I can point out is if an owner owns many units in a complex and the ownership is, we think that it's John that owns it, but in fact it's Trust 1, Trust 2, and Trust 3. They are deemed to be separate legal entities, and based on that, based on the ownership, they will have 3 voting cards and not 1 voting card based on that principle. So we need to also take that into consideration. So that's the owners, the invitees. I'm not going to go into the groups. As I said, we can create groups. You can create groups here. I can point out one thing that I did forget to mention is I do have on this list, I also have an outside proxy holder with a value of 0. So if anybody joins the meeting from an external point and you want to add them, you can create the invite for them. You can add their name and their email addresses, but they won't have a voting power because they will not have. You can't add a PQ value to them. It can only be done through the units and owners side. So on this side, if I bring, say, Zelinda in on a consultation for me when I run a meeting, I can send an invite to her, but she won't have any voting powers assigned to her, or I can assign a proxy to her if I do prefer. So on that basis, this is typically what we can then do. The next step is then for us to, I can also, I'll get into suspensions just now. So I'm going to just send out the invites to my team and myself, so that what it will do is we'll then go into the back end and then it will fire off all the emails for us on the systems, so that I can see, and I can also, let me just check, it's gone through, and I can at the bottom here see when was email sent to that owner, which email addresses, and so we've got all of that. And on the front end, I should shortly get, okay, so I do have one. I just want to open it up and bring it across onto this slide. So typically this is what the invite will look like. As you've seen in the preview, when the meeting is going to happen, the documents, there's the download document. The document itself is not attached to the email, so we don't have any problems with the size limits on email accounts. So you can then download the meeting or the documents on that side. So this is typically with all the instructions and the formatting as we've set it up that will come through. All right, so that's the back end, and the invites have now gone out. We then need to define our resolutions, and typically we can also upload resolutions, or in my case, I'm just going to add a resolution, and I'm going to call this resolution approve 2020 AGM held at the pool. Funny how many meetings happen at the pool, but so I'm going to then add a meeting at the pool, and then I can say, I can give it a wording and an and then let's say approve minutes. Don't worry about the spelling, as circulated on date. Any case, so we've got that, and then I need to link it to an agenda item. And this is where it will pop up in the app under which agenda as we step through the meeting. It will then open up on that agenda item. So I'm going to say I'm going to approve it there. And then I've got two types of resolutions that we can vote on. The one is a yes, no, the old show of hands principle where I can say yes, no, or there's a multi-select, and that's typically on the trustees election. And I can then also identify the resolution as either ordinary, special, or unanimous. And we then will take into consideration the back end, the rules pertaining to special, say, for instance, that 75% of the owners need to vote in favor with a normal quorum, unanimous, and 80%, and everybody, and so all those rules are built into the back end to assist you in managing your resolution. So I've got that one with all the fraud spelling in there. And let me add one more resolution, and this one will be the elect trustees doing here. Any case, and then typically this one I will link into my election of my trustees, and now I will have my multi-select. So first of all, I can then add a name. I've got Jan, Span, and Sue. Those are my nominations that I had before the meeting. I can save the changes, and I'll explain to you the message that's popping up there now. So I'll save it, and then normally point 12, if you follow the standard agenda, point 12 on the agenda is where you need to determine the number of trustees. Once you've determined the number of trustees over here, you can then come back and say the number of trustees determined by the previous vote is set to 2. And then if I then save that again, and this will then prohibit people on the front end to cast votes for more than 2. So I will never have a spoiled ballot where typically, for instance, we have 10 nominations, we decide on 7, and one client goes and tick, 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 all 10 of them, and we just don't know which one to go for. So we then limit and ensure that you don't have a spoiled voting paper on that basis, then you can set that up. So that's typically how we will do the backing. Then we can then assign proxies. So I'm going to add a proxy. I'm going to give a proxy. Let me give this proxy to I think that one. If it's not that way, I'm going to, but in any case, so I can add a proxy. I'll add another proxy. Let's say, for instance, this person is also giving it to, I want to specifically use Ricky now again. And now we're going and say, okay, we have another person that wants to assign their proxy to Ricky. But now it says to me that Ricky is already carrying too many proxies. This person has reassigned their proxy, so they cannot accept proxies. They will not be prohibited at the meeting. So I can then based on that, manage that. So let me then give this proxy. So I want to use, let's say, for instance, this person, I'm going to assign a proxy to Victor. So, okay, I've got my 2 proxy holders at the back end. Michael, I'm not going to give you a proxy. I think you are registered, so you should be able to check. I can quickly just check here and just check if I do a search. I can search by either the name or the number, the unit number, or wherever that text comes will be available. So now I've got my proxies. I can also set up suspensions. So suspensions, I can do suspensions on owners with judgments against them, or in HOAs that's on arrears, but for BCs not. It's just if you've got a judgment against you that we can set suspensions. The suspensions will only be applicable to ordinary resolutions. For special and unanimous resolutions, we open up again the suspension so you can cast your vote on any of those. So, all right, so let me then go into my back end, and before I'm going to go there, I'm going to join the meeting on this side. Press spell. So I'm going to log in, and on here I can now see that I've got an upcoming event for this meeting that I've been set to attend, but I think I need to just give myself a proxy here quickly. Let me add a proxy for that one to outside proxy, or that one. So I'll just add a proxy there so that at least I can show you how this person votes. All right, so there I've got my proxies. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the status of the meeting. Up to now, the meeting was closed. Now I can open the meeting. I'll set the status to open. Immediately, it will now pop into the position where they can join the live meeting. It will now be a live meeting. And what I want to do is at the back end here, when they join the meeting, you can see I can now at the back end see already who has joined the meeting. So as people join the meeting, I can see that they've joined the meeting and whether they can and can't vote. So typically on the front end, if I carry a proxy, I do get a notice that I am carrying a proxy has been assigned to me, and that I need to cast my vote in accordance with the proxy's instructions. I say, yeah, I'm happy, I'll do that. And then I will then also be signed in. So we can see the number of owners, the people that has attended, as well as at the bottom here, we can now see whether we do actually have a quorum based on the number of units that has now joined. So by signing in, I can have a number of units. It automatically calculates my unit or my quorum values for me. So I can see I'm at 40%. So this meeting can carry on. I can also see at the back end, typically, which owners can and can't vote. So typically, if I do find that this person's got a query there that they can't vote, and it's most probably because Punat Sisbis is not set to be the voting power. So if I go to the unit, I can see Punat Sisbis is not set to be the voting power. Now I can set that. And if I go back, I can now see that they can vote. This person is an outside proxy holder. They don't own any units, so they won't be able to vote on anything unless they carry a proxy. So, but they have signed in. I've signed in via on behalf of this owner via proxy. So it now shows who signed in. So the attendance register is also built up at the back end for us on that basis. All right, so now what we are going to do is I'm going to open the voting, and for that to happen is I'm going to go to the back end and say I want to open the voting. The moment I click open voting, you'll notice that I do have a pop-up message popping up here and telling me that I have a vote to cast, and I can now start casting my votes. And let me just, again, on this side, I'll show you what's happening at the back end. Okay, now that my team is casting their votes, you can see that dynamically, as they cast their votes, the yes, no's votes are coming in, and I can see that. I will ignore abstention. So if anybody does click an abstention, we will ignore that, and I'm going to cast my vote for yes now. I just waited for them. Somebody's changed their mind, so I'm going to cast my vote for yes. My vote has just been added. At the bottom end, at the back end as well, we can see who has casted their votes and what did they cast. What was the votes that they brought out. That's important for record purposes. This record does get written away in the database. So if anybody wants to come back to the body corporate in the next 6 years, they're welcome to do that. We do retain the record of their vote, and we then will have an immediate calculation of the number of yes votes, the number of no votes, the value vote, and the percentage of owners that were in attendance and what they voted. And at the back end also, the app pings the owners to make sure that we maintain a quorum throughout the meeting. Whenever we step through every agenda item, we can then identify our quorum requirements. Are we in quorum requirements, yes or no? So that's what's happening at the back end here. I can dynamically, if you do want, you can see if I have my abstentions as a separate vote. Which, okay, there's an abstention. Thank you for the pal that made the abstention. So you'll see that it will then reflect as a separate vote. Homeowners associations, you can do it as yes or no, or in this case, I'm just going to ignore it. Whatever the people vote to the back end as abstentions, in terms of the STSM, we will just ignore that. So what will happen, what I can also point out at this point in time is, say, for instance, somebody say, hold on, we need to change the wording. So we want to say that subject to paragraph 3.2, value to change to Rand 10,000. Say, for instance, we made a typo, and they say we will approve it subject to these changes. Then what will happen is, if I now go and I save these changes, effectively it becomes a new vote. What will happen is it will now delete all the votes that have been casted, so I can say yes, and now it's still again now awaiting votes. And if I then go again into my results, it would have cleared the results. Thank you, pals. If you can please, there they go. Now it's a new vote. They can confirm their votes and cast their votes on that basis. So I'm going to go also on my side and just update my vote. So there's the votes up to the point where I can now go and say, okay, I'm happy with the results. I am going to announce the results. Now and again, now it depends on the managing agents. Some of them just close the results on this side. They specifically just do not, and they read out the results verbally. I prefer to go and say, I want to freeze the results. And the moment I freeze the results, nobody can no longer come back, change the wording, and or cast another vote. So I can open the vote technically on this side and have somebody cast a vote, but if I go freeze the results, nobody can now, I can't edit this. If I want to edit it, I can't edit it. It's now fixed. So it's been written away as a record, and immediately on the app, the results are displayed immediately. So it's calculated dynamically at the back end, pushed to the front end. The moment you freeze the results with the changes in the wording, the fraud spelling, everything like that, it is then written into the front. I can also, at this point in time, we also recommend that you email your votes to all your participants so that they have a record of the vote that they've just casted. So they will get an email from MeetingPal saying to them, let me just open up one. Sorry, I don't know what I've done with that. There we go. So they can get a confirmation of the votes that they've just cast. So nobody can tamper with it. The managing agent, the administrator, once it's locked, you get a record of your voting, and you've casted your votes. So everything is then sent to you at the back end, so that you have full-on confirmation on that you have voted, and that's a position. So I'm just going to open up another one, the election of trustees. So typically, if I just minimize this one on this, we step through the agenda, we get to the position where we need to cast a vote on the election of trustees. I open the vote, and now if I then click on it, I can now cast my vote as an owner. Who's the owner, the details. I can go, let me just go in the back end here. So you can see I can go and Jan Sue, but now I've already casted my vote for 2. I cannot elect another one. I have to go, I want to change it to Sue. And then you can, it automatically dynamically ranks the nominations. And if, for instance, we do, as I said, we do get a position where it's go like, hold on, we want to have another nomination. If you, depending on the chairperson, if they want to allow another nomination and they want to add an option and say Harvey, and let's make it then 3, just to show that it's dynamically. So the voting is open now. Harvey is immediately set to the front end. I can then go into election for Harvey as well, so people can now select Harvey, but now it's limited to 3. So that's in essence the back end and the front end, how it correlates, how it works in conjunction with each other. And then lastly, you as an owner or as an administrator, you can download your attendance register. So I'm not going to close, so I can download the attendance register. It will download the attendance register for me now. I'm not going to do that. I can also get a download of the full meeting of all the records, all the attendees, all the votes casted. I can also, under my resolutions, download all the results for all the votes in one record, and it will build it into a specific format that I see that owners do prefer to use, where they have let me just open it up, where it spreads it out, where you can see all your votes. And let me just open it. So you can see typically there it is, which owner, what was their votes on this resolution. They voted yes, and who did they voted for on that side. So that's that spreadsheet that I see on the sectional title group is going around. So we populate it for you automatically, the backend. You can then also use this as your spreadsheet. You can do a full-on download, as I say, of the minutes. Speaking of minutes, you can capture your minutes at the back end to contain a full-on record, so you can add a discussion ensued, discussed, and you save your changes. It will then be on the front end. Then you can, if you want to add an action item, we edit your action, who's to do what by when, what's the conclusion, good old minutes taking, and then from there you can then download it as a Word document, circulate it between your trustees within the 7-day period. Once everybody is happy, you go email it to owners, and it pushes out the minutes to your owners. Lastly, what I want to just show is this is not available to you at the back end, but this is just an assurance for owners and for managing agents and or users, that every time somebody makes a decision and or interacts with the system, we do pick up the audit trail at the back end, so we can comply and confirm that it was this person that made this decision. So it ties up with the proxies, ties up with the resolutions, the attendance register, as well as all the buttons you've clicked, the votes. So while the voting is open, you can go yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, up to the point where the chairperson is saying, I'm going to close the votes. Up to that point, when they close or freeze the results, whatever your last vote was will be the vote that will be submitted and counted. So that's the system at the back end.